Thank you so much. I'm sorry. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for investing your time with us today. My name is Loela Hammonds, and I'll be moderator for today's panel. A little bit about me. I have 15 years of federal government service, and prior to that, I worked in the private sector as a contractor to government to the federal government. My current role is as a consolidation program manager at General Services Administration, GSA, Public Building Service, Office of Portfolio and Customer Engagement, where I also serve on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Advisory Board in our office. And additionally, I obtained my DEIA certification from Cornell University. The General Services Administration is celebrating Construction Inclusion Week, a virtual industry-wide awareness effort to improve diversity and inclusion in the construction industry. Throughout the week, GSA has been sharing information about our commitment and accountability to ongoing DEIA initiatives centered around daily themes. Today, we have an amazing panel on supplier diversity. So what is supplier diversity? It's about equaling the playing field so that everyone has access to the same opportunities. And supplier diversity is a strategy that seeks out and welcomes diverse suppliers regardless of their ethnicity, gender, or socioeconomic status. But supplier diversity does not happen on its own. It is an intentional strategy that drives change and encourages the inclusion of often overlooked suppliers. GSA is committed to the fair inclusion of diverse suppliers in its procurement activities by encouraging the participation of socioeconomic small businesses and awarding a substantial share of contracts to such businesses. We actively seek to foster business relationships with diverse suppliers who offer high quality goods and services with competitive pricing and premium customer service. Our goal today is whatever your role is in this industry, you will come away with something such as a fresh idea, a new perspective, or a strategy that you can apply to become more successful in your business. But before we get into our conversation about various aspects of supplier diversity, with our amazing panel, I have the privilege of introducing our guest speaker who will be providing opening remarks. Mr. Matthew Bloom is the Associate Administrator at the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, Office of Management and Budget in Washington, D.C. He manages the development of legislation, regulation, and policies to promote efficient, effective, and innovative acquisition practices. Mr. Bloom is a contributing author to a variety of government contract publications, including articles that have appeared in the Journal of Strategic Contracting and Negotiation, Contract Management, the Government Contractor, the Procurement Lawyer, and the Administrative Law Journal of the American University. Mr. Bloom is a National Academy of Public Administration Fellow, the 2017 recipient of John F. Frank Award, recognizing contributions to a more effective and collaborative government, a two-time winner of Federal Computer Week's Fed 100 Award, and recipient of the Coalition for Government Procurement Unsung Hero Award for Procurement Policy Excellence. In 2010, Mr. Bloom received a Presidential Rank Award for his ongoing work in OMB. Mr. Bloom is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate from the College of William and Mary. He received a Juris Doctor with honors from the George Washington University Law School, where he serves as a member of the Government Contracts Advisory Board. He is also a member of the District Columbia Bar and the Virginia Bar. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Matthew Bloom.
Thanks, Loela. Thanks so much. And I'm really delighted to be here today to kick off this critical conversation on supplier diversity as part of Construction Inclusion Week, and to say a few words on the administration's commitment to advancing equity through federal procurement. Those of you that are in this space know that these are busy and exciting times, and probably also know that President Biden loves procurement because he knows that through federal procurement, we have the chance to create a lasting and positive impact for our country. He sees procurement as a way to make progress on some of his top priorities, whether it's advancing equity or fighting climate change or strengthening our domestic supply chains. The direction in the president's executive order issued on the first day of his administration to advance racial equity by removing barriers faced by underserved communities and promoting greater diversity and resilience in federal contracting has become a true springboard for transformative action. One of those transformative actions took place just months into the administration on the centennial of the Tulsa Race Massacre, when President Biden announced a goal of increasing the share of federal contract dollars going to small disadvantaged businesses to 15% by 2025, which represents a 50% increase from most recent spending levels at the end of the last administration. And the Biden-Harris administration is delivering, and most importantly. The SBA, the Small Business Administration's annual small business procurement scorecard for fiscal 21 shows over $62 billion, or just over 11% of all contracting dollars, were awarded to contracts with SDBs, which is a record amount of spending, far exceeding the 5% statutory goal that's established in the Small Business Act. I think equally impressive to the total spend going to small businesses, which includes women-owned small businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, hub-zone small businesses, and other small businesses, was the over $154 billion that went to all of this community, which translates to 27.2% of our contracting dollars. Now, while the final data is not yet available for the fiscal year just concluded, we are optimistic that you will continue to see clear evidence of progress and commitment. And the administration's work is far from done. Earlier this month, to kick off the fiscal 23, O&B Director Young announced that the 23 goal for SDBs will be 12%, as we move closer to the 15% on a path that we project will result in an additional $100 billion being awarded to small disadvantaged businesses over a 5-year period. Now, to help ensure that we are all rowing in the same direction, all senior executives who are responsible for acquisition, or those whose programs or projects are supported by contractors, and that accounts for, I think, over 3,500 people, now have achievement of each socioeconomic and small business goal as part of their performance plans. In short, we are using all of the government-wide management levers to advance equity in procurement. I am really excited by the attention that is being given to the advancing equity in construction contracting in particular. As I assume you know, construction contracting represents one of the largest portfolio areas of spend in federal contracting, with billions of additional dollars in the bipartisan infrastructure law funding available for spending through direct federal procurement. It is obviously critically important that underserved small businesses not be left behind. Already, agencies are leveraging direct procurement to ensure underserved small businesses can compete for federal opportunities. We know, for example, that the Federal Aviation Administration has expanded its use of set-aside competitions and increased its threshold for making non-competitive awards to the SBA-certified 8A firms for bipartisan infrastructure law-funded acquisitions. During today's panel, GSA will share important developments from its acquisition efforts that further illustrate the administration's commitment to maximizing small disadvantaged business opportunities in construction contracting. These include awards for architectural and engineering services, and land port repair projects to 8A contractors, including economically disadvantaged women-owned small businesses. Equally important, these contractors are meeting the challenge to advance buy clean priorities, such as by using low embodied carbon asphalt. So a great demonstration of how we are integrating all of our priorities to work together to further the efficiency of government performance and service delivery. In the months to come, you will be hearing about additional actions the administration is taking to broaden the diversity and strengthen the resiliency of the federal contracting base. This includes the use of new management tools to track our progress in attracting and retaining new entrants, both across the federal enterprise and within different market segments, which includes construction. And we will also be deploying tools that make it easier for our buying offices to find contractors who are interested in working with the federal government, especially those that have already registered to do business but haven't received any awards. We also have efforts underway to strengthen the content and timeliness of procurement forecasts, so prospective contractors have more time to get prepared for future construction contracting opportunities. There is still much to be done, but I think in sum, if we stay on course and work closely with the community through events like those being held today, thanks to GSA, I think this period in federal acquisition history will be remembered as a turning point in our ability to build a more diverse and resilient supplier base to support all the services that our citizens expect and deserve of their government. So once again, thank you for setting up this panel. Thank you for having this important conversation, and thank you for inviting me to listen in.
Thanks, Mr. Bloom, for your opening remarks. I love the resilient and diverse supplier base conversation and the idea of integrating priorities so that's really what this conversation is all about. So I'm really excited to move into the discussion that we're going to have today, and to give everybody an idea of the format. And what we're going to be talking about is I'll take a few minutes to introduce each of the panelists. We're going to talk a little bit about their background in the industry, because that brings relevance to the conversation. And then I'm going to kick off the conversation and direct the discussion through questions that draw out some of the high-level themes and ensure that each panelist has a chance to contribute. I'm hoping that sounds great for everybody. Let's go ahead and get started, and let me kick it off with some of the panelists' introduction. So I'm going to start off with Veronica Puhin, Senior Advisor, Office of Capital Access at the U.S. Small Business Administration. We also have on our panel Exodi C. Rowe III, Associate Administrator for the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization at the U.S. General Services Administration. Tracy Marcinowski is a member of our panel, the Assistant Commissioner for Acquisitions at the GSA's Public Building Service. Kristen Gergo, Region 6 Business Development Branch Chief, GSA's Federal Acquisition Service, Office of Customer and Stakeholder Engagement, and Aaron Evanson, Capital Project Manager at GSA's Public Building Service. So I'm going to start off our conversation with Tracy Marcinowski. So Tracy, as the Assistant Commissioner for Acquisitions at GSA's Public Building Service, you're responsible for the service's acquisition environment, including policy development, acquisition reform initiatives, category management, and acquisition workforce development and career management. Additionally, prior to GSA, you began your contracting career as the Air Force Active Duty Contracting Officer, serving all over the world, serving in roles of ever-increasing responsibility with the Department of Defense, the U.S. Coast Guard, the Department of Veteran Affairs. And you and I have talked a lot about your career through the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility lens. Would you just mind sharing a little bit about that, sharing some of your thoughts?
No, and I really appreciate being here. I think this is an important conversation that we're having today. Lola and I have had an opportunity to talk in the past about what it's like becoming, being a senior leader as a woman, as a veteran, working across countries and states to try and figure out how best we can meet our country's needs, and looking for those opportunities that don't always, they're not thrown out there in big, bold neon letters, and how we navigate that field. One of the biggest things to me personally, as I've embarked looking at PBS's program and how we're going to be spending money, is how I would pay it forward. I didn't get to where I am today because, without a lot of help, a lot of people providing me guidance, advice, answering questions, sometimes questions I didn't even know I had. And I believe very strongly that I need to provide that same information to others who are trying to look and see how they can get ahead, how they can do business with the federal government, share the knowledge that I've earned over 20 plus years in the career field, and provide those opportunities that once upon a time I was provided as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Tracy. So there's a lot of buzz, as Mr. Bloom just talked about, the $3.4 billion GSA received from the bipartisan infrastructure law, or bill, as it's more commonly known. GSA PBS has 26 major construction and modernization projects at land ports of entry on the country's northern and southern borders, critical gateways for commerce that need to be secure and efficient. Could you discuss GSA's commitment to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility by engaging local communities in projects and providing opportunities for small disadvantaged businesses to contribute to these projects?
I'd be more than happy to. And kind of glad the first question wasn't on our other source of funding, the IRA. But yes, GSA has already begun reaching out to local communities. That has been a cornerstone of our strategy as we've been planning these projects, many of which we're still very much in the planning phase, looking at how we're going to integrate into the infrastructure within these local communities as we expand the land ports of entry, and ensuring that there are opportunities for the community, companies across the nation to provide and support. Just as an understanding of how these projects are going to be impacting the country, we're actually estimating that these projects are going to create about 6,000 jobs and generate about $3 billion in labor income over the next 8 years. And obviously, we want to make sure that there's opportunities across the board as we move through these projects execution. So we're meeting with industry now. We have quarterly national industry engagement dates, not just on these 26 projects, but on every single one of our opportunities that are going to be happening in FY23 and over the next few years, with a special emphasis on these 26 major construction projects. We're cognizant of the fact that these are kind of major, complex construction projects, and the barriers that still exist in the construction industry to entry on projects of this nature are still going to be there for the next few years. But we want to make sure that we're working with the businesses who do receive these contracts to ensure that we're paying it forward. We're going to be negotiating high small business subcontracting goals. We're going to be looking at every single contract that makes up that large construction project and seeing where there's opportunities, engaging with industry, making sure that communication is out there at all times. We don't want to be, working in a vacuum or in a silo. We want to be out there ensuring that everyone is aware of the opportunities and helping to foster the relationships with all companies at all levels across every single market where these projects are occurring.
Wow, thank you for your honesty about some of the challenges that we face, but also emphasizing the importance of being able to provide awareness, not operating in a vacuum, so we can all come together to work out solutions and strategies to overcome some of those challenges. But this is a huge opportunity, so thank you for those comments, Tracy. Since we are talking about the bipartisan infrastructure bill and land ports of entry, LPOEs, I wanted to bring in Aaron Evanson into the conversation as well. So Aaron, you have over 20 years of construction experience specializing in historical renovation and worked as a construction project manager with GSA for the past 10 years. You also bring a really valuable perspective based on your work experience prior to GSA. You worked in the private sector for a day labor company, rising through the trade as a carpenter, construction superintendent, and project manager for both residential, commercial builders in Seattle, Washington, and Washington, D.C. I would like you to first talk a little bit about your experience working for a small company with respect to diversity and inclusion, and how that experience translates into your current role as a capital project manager with GSA.
Thanks, Loela. So starting with, so I was in the Navy for about 5 years, and I got out and I was going through a community college program, and joining as a day laborer, basically as a carpenter, while I was in school. And so I was hired by a company that was a residential home builder, a pretty high-end residential home builder, as a day laborer to start with, and it was quickly became friends with with the people that own the company, and basically rose through the ranks as a carpenter and then as a project site superintendent. And it was amazing to me that the company that I was working with did a very impressive job of including very diverse backgrounds, both in the workers that they hired and also in the subcontractors that they hired. This was in the late 90s and early 2000s, and to have women-owned excavation companies that we hired, and to have very racially diverse companies that were included into the construction process was, to be perfectly honest, kind of unprecedented in that industry, in that local industry at the time. And it gave me a viewpoint and shed some light on all of the amazing experiences that so many people that we kind of discount within the construction industry had at that point in time and continue to have now. And it's very much colored the way that I see the diversity and inclusion in GSA's outreach and in GSA's contracting, and especially in the contractors that I have used regularly and that I continue to encourage to develop relationships within those diverse areas.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Aaron. I really appreciate it. So there's currently about 167 land ports of entry LPOEs at America's borders. The Biden administration announced that the bipartisan infrastructure law will invest more than $187 million in the design and construction of a new Alcan border station in Alaska. This is the most isolated LPOE between the United States and Canada and experiences some of the most extreme weather conditions in the world. So for this project, could you describe some of the challenges you've experienced with this highly visible project?
Absolutely. So this is a really fun one. It is approximately 5 hours southeast of Fairbanks and about 7 hours northeast of Anchorage, Alaska. It's right on the border in between Canada and Alaska, and it is one of the only land entry points to access Alaska that we have. And to get there from the United States, you'd actually drive up through Seattle or one of the other northern border stations and then cut across all the way through the Yukon into Alaska. So it is way out there. We only have about a 3 to 4 month building window because the highs reach, actually they just hit 87 for the first time ever this past year. It's typically in the 80s Fahrenheit, and then the lows are in the -70s to -80s. The lowest temperature recorded out there in the last 20 years is about -90 degrees Fahrenheit. But not only is it remote, we have a very sparse selection of qualified contractors in the area. It's completely off grid. It's all generator run. So diesel is actually imported to the site. It's trucked to the site at about 10,000 gallons a month. So it's very difficult to achieve net zero sites or LEED accreditation at this facility. And so we are currently developing a project development study, which is going to help us guide how those achievements can, or at least as close as we possibly can to making those achievements. There's been a lot of discussion also about CBP, which is the Customs and Border Protection, and GSA's goals as they relate to this site. We have a project agreement with CBP on basically it's called the Program of Requirements, and it's a list that GSA and CBP have gone over together and agreed that these are the most important aspects about a new or a remodeled border station that we're doing right now. So ensuring that CBP and GSA are on the same page about what they want for these border crossings. And at this point in time, we have two alternatives. We have two major alternatives. One is to actually remodel in place And the other option is to actually build about 4 miles inland from the existing border station itself. So again, the location itself provides a very difficult situation as far as getting materials on site, getting the contractors and trades on site, and then also coordinating with local communities to make sure that the project itself is supporting them.
Right.
So there's some very big challenges on this one.
On that one. So when you talked, and just a really quick question to expand on that, when you talked about sort of these challenges, are there particular solutions? I think you talked about before, you mentioned modular solutions. Can you talk anything, just add a little bit to what you're thinking could be some of the potential options with that solution?
Yes, absolutely. So modular construction has increased leaps and bounds over the last few years. Before I joined GSA, I was actually, and after I moved back from Washington, D.C., I was the project manager for a construction company out of Ferndale, Washington, which is just south of the border, the Alaskan border. And we built very high-end, incredibly insulated, very sustainable modular construction buildings, mostly residential, but some commercial as well, where we actually built the structures in segments. And so they were actually modules of a home or of a business that we would actually be able to truck to different remote locations. And we built them all the way from the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho out to the Desolation Sound in Washington, Washington's Puget Sound. And in some cases, we barged them to islands. In some cases, they were trucked. But they were always, we always did this in coordination with local crane companies. And we would set up the foundations, we would build the infrastructure of the site itself, and then we would actually remotely build what would normally be built on site, all the wood and siding and windows and all that went together to create this module that was trucked to the site, placed on site, and then all the modules were independently placed and then tied together. And so, you know, the final parts of the drywall would be put inside, you know, joining, siding would be put on, and then roofing and all that kind of stuff would go on after all of these modular pieces were put on site. So we've been discussing that option within GSA quite extensively. Not specifically from this company, but there are quite a few different firms out there that are specializing in modular construction now. And because of that very small building window, this is a very good option for that site.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I just think it's great that you're able to share with folks on the call some ideas that we're already starting to think about that could expand the opportunity for more suppliers to be able to contribute to the solutions. Now, I'm going to be coming back to you toward the end and kind of, you know, have you as you're listening to some of these other panelists with these great ideas, great conversation to see if we've helped you solve some of the problems you might be experiencing with this project. So I'll circle back to you.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, and I want to expand the conversation to include the opportunity in the marketplace through category management by adding Kristen Gergel to the conversation. Kristen, like Tracy and Aaron, you bring a wealth of experience to the discussion in terms of your prior roles, which include being a program manager, contracting officer representative, a customer service director, and a national account manager. You shared with me how your experience in each of these roles built upon your diverse perspective in your current role, not only as the Region 6 Business Development Branch Chief, but also you're serving as the project manager for the largest government-wide category known as Facilities and Construction, where you are responsible for helping to increase efficiency and effectiveness while reducing costs and redundancies through category management. So just to take a step back, for those of us who are not as familiar with acquisition and procurement terminology, can you give us an overview of what category management is and explain how small businesses in particular can thrive within category management?
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Kristen Gergo. I am one of the program managers that represents the facilities and construction category, as well as as Loyola said, I'm a Region 6 GSA case branch chief. I'm here today to talk to you high level about the facilities and construction category itself, as well as give a brief overview of what category management is and how it pertains to government as well as industry. So first, I'll start off with giving the high level overview of the category. As just previously mentioned, the facilities and construction category is the largest across the 10 categories that we have government-wide. This past year, FY22, our annual spend was $100+ billion. Within the category, we have 5 subcategories, with the 2 largest being facilities-related services and construction-related services. They equate to the majority bulk of our spend. As FY22 has just recently wrapped up and we move into FY23, we have noted a decline in some of our obligations that happened from FY19 to the current. The decline is the result, as we believe, to a variety of different factors that I truly believe impact not just the facilities and construction category, but really all the government-wide categories across the board. So I'll highlight the first challenge that we saw was the fact that we had a continuing resolution and didn't receive funding until March. So for those of you that are familiar with how this works, a lot of our spend couldn't actually start happening until post the CR. And then with the DoD lag in reporting, we didn't really see the numbers hit our numbers, our books, until really the very end of Q4. So they weren't necessarily represented in our snapshot in time. The second challenge, again, something that I think everybody on this call is probably too familiar with, is the aftermath of COVID with regards to the supply chain challenges, reduction in workforce, all of the good things that we just can't seem to kick with COVID. And lastly, the impacts of the border mission and the cancellation of the border mission, as well as all of the canceled contracts that went along with that, really impacted the facilities construction category. So now we'll switch gears a little bit and I'll talk about some of the benefits of category management and the focus that OMB and the government-wide program management office has to not only maintain, but to also improve small business participation in our out years. So category management is a strategic business practice to buy smarter. It delivers more savings, value, and efficiency for federal agencies. It eliminates duplicative contracts and helps our agency partners meet their small business goals. It serves as a process improvement on how industry does business with the government, and it decreases cost for bids, proposals, and contract administration. It is again sponsored by the Office of Management and Budget and led by the government-wide Category Management Program Management Office, should anybody on the call want additional information on category management.
Well, thank you so much for being really transparent about some of the challenges so that we're being open and honest in our communication, and then talking about some of the benefits and advantages. And thank you for those resources that people can reach out for to get more information, Kristen. I want to expand this conversation around small businesses and introduce Exodi Rowe III. I want to share first a little bit about his journey prior to joining GSA, because it really speaks to his personal dedication to DEIA and advocacy for small businesses. So in 2007, Exodi started his government service with Congressman Jerry McNerney of California, rising to become his senior advisor from his senior policy advisor. From 2019 to 21, he served as the Director of Policy and External Affairs for the Congressional Black Caucus under Chairwoman Karen Bass in the 116th Congress. During his congressional service, he worked with congressional leadership and congressional members on political strategy, strategic communication, regulatory issues, advocacy, and a broad range of public policy initiatives, including small business legislation to strengthen minority and disadvantaged businesses. In his current role as the Associate Administrator for the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization at GSA, he has nationwide responsibility for GSA's small business programs and it plays a chief role as advocate for small and disadvantaged businesses. This is a really amazing journey, Zodi, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your career from the DEI lens and perspective before we get into a couple of questions for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. And I'm happy to see everybody here, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation so much. So yes, I have worked on small business policy for a very long time in Congress. In fact, I was responsible for literally shepherding and leading and developing statutory authorization for the Minority Business Development Agency under Chairwoman Karen Bass and the CBC. And so the president actually signed that bill into law. President Biden signed that bill into law, and so very excited about that. Now the agency has permanent statutory authorization. That's huge for minority businesses, and it gives the dedicated support that they need from that agency and others working with minority businesses to be able to provide them with the resources to be successful in the federal marketplace.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So Zodi, like all federal agencies, GSA has socioeconomic goals, and we have to strive to exceed, and we strive to exceed our socioeconomic small business goals by maximizing opportunities both at the prime and subcontracting levels. As an advocate for small business owners, how do you promote increased access to GSA's nationwide procurement opportunities?
Now, great question. So at GSA, OSDBU, just for everyone to know, we have nationwide responsibility for GSA. OSDBU has nationwide responsibility for GSA small business programs, and we promote increased access to GSA's nationwide procurement opportunities. One of the things that I'm most excited by and I'm happy about to report to this folks here is that for fiscal year 22, and Matthew Bloom spoke to this earlier, the president has asked all agencies to do more around small disadvantaged businesses, and GSA, hearkened to that call, and we raised our SDB spend, our goal from 5% to 21% in fiscal year 22. And the reason why is because it helps the entire federal government hit the president's goal of getting to 15% for SDB spend across the federal government by 2025. And so for the end of this fiscal year, for the end of fiscal year 22, excuse me, not fiscal year 23, because we're in a new fiscal year, we actually achieved that goal. So our goal was 21%, and we actually we came in at around 22% for our SDB. So that's huge, and I think that speaks a lot to the commitment of PBS, the commitment of FAST, the commitment of the entire GSA, our business service lines, OAS, our staff offices. We really have a strong culture here at GSA of supporting small businesses. And I think that we could never have achieved that goal if it wasn't for us working so well together as a team.
Yeah. So a couple of key points, and I just want to thank you so much for that, because there's lots of nuggets of knowledge nuggets that I want to hit there. You talked about the importance of goal setting. So striving for targets. So if there's any business out there that's looking for ways to get started, one might be to establish some goals. Commitment and the culture are critical and important facets of that. So thank you so much for those pieces of information. I'll be getting back to you in a bit with just a couple of other questions as well. But I wanted to bring in another aspect of supplier diversity, particularly as it relates to small business and federal contracting. And it deals with this notion of access to capital and liquidity for construction projects. So resources and avenues to really help small businesses achieve success, but also to really talk about where the opportunities are and some of the realities for small business. So for the portion of this conversation, I'm going to pull in Veronica. So Veronica Puhin has been selected to serve as the senior advisor to the SBA's Office of Capital Access in the U.S. Small Business Administration. And in this role, she leads programs and projects to deliver small business capital resources across the country with a focus on equity and accessibility. So prior to Veronica's Biden-Harris administration political appointment, she worked on equitable small business capital access for the state of California. She led macroeconomic planning and small business operations at LinkedIn. She oversaw project operations for a financial inclusion technology company. and that focused on underserved communities. And as a consultant, she worked with the nonprofit and government clients on programs targeting underserved communities with a particular focus on Latino and underbanked populations. And as the daughter of Latino immigrants, she talks about being honored to bring her personal and professional insight to the SBA and serving the country's small businesses and promoting an economy that really works for all. So Veronica, you and I were really able to kind of openly talk about your family, and you shared with me just this really great perspective from your family's perspective on the two paths to the American dream. So would you mind just talking a little bit about that before we get into a few questions for you?
Sure, and thank you. And thank you for all those attending this conversation and contributing to it. Just following up on that, yes, it's a real honor and real privilege to get to serve in this capacity and work with colleagues and stakeholders who are pushing for positive change. Because ultimately, I think, if we take a step back from supplier diversity, capital access, this is all about opportunity and the American dream, which is what my parents came to this country pursuing. And this country is definitely not perfect, and we continue on the journey to get it closer to being more what it can be. But one thing that I think is special about the country that I'm excited to work with colleagues in promoting this for everyone, which is not currently the case right now, but let's continue the work there, is the paths to the American dream and economic access right now are essentially the more formal and traditional ones are formal higher education and small business. Those are two key paths for economic access and economic prosperity. And so the higher education, a formal higher education and workforce programs, that's one category that various agencies and colleagues are working hard on. And the small business one is a critical one, and a small business getting a contract like the ones being discussed today could be completely life-changing for that small business, for that family, for that multi-generational access to business expansion, business ownership, real estate access. And so that's why I'm particularly excited about this conversation, that it's, we can get very technical, but I like to take a step back and realize this is about people, it's about families, it's about generations that can really benefit from this.
Thank you so much, Veronica. So to your point, let's really dive into this real critical question, which is sort of talking about the relevance of, why is the lack of access to resources primarily the financial gap or the lack of funding for small businesses? Why does that have to be absolutely part of the conversation? Because in our discussions, you really brought that home with me, and I'm grateful to you for that. So I'd like for you to kind of expand on that. And then we'll talk about sort of SBA's, the Office of Capital Access and how it's working to make that a reality for small businesses. But talk to me about that gap and why it has to be part of the conversation.
Sure. So a variety of other colleagues and stakeholders have done an effective job at highlighting kind of the complexities and the opportunities here in terms of these contracting opportunities. What I see a lot is that there's a critical step of getting the contract, getting that opportunity, which that's already one big journey for that small business to take. And the unfortunate experience that I see is they get the contract and they don't get the financial resources to be able to fulfill the contract. And so that gap is something that I'm really excited to be working with other stakeholders on how can we close that gap. The capital gap nationwide is not news. It's not unique to just the supplier diversity conversation. Broadly speaking, the capital gap correlates very directly with wealth, access to assets, and the historical realities that contribute to that. And so what we see is the reason someone can't get that financing to fulfill that contract is the same reason that capital is difficult to come across in general. One detail that I'll highlight for small business owners is sometimes people think, well, I got a contract, this federal contract or this government contract, shouldn't that be enough for the lender, the bank? I'm for sure going to make this revenue is going to come in. And some lenders will have that approach and feel that determine in their analysis that is enough. Some lenders will not determine that because that contract that you obtained as a small business owner cannot fulfill the role of collateral. The reason it can't fill the role of collateral is, let's say things don't work out for the small business, the lender can't take that contract and sell it to get some value, recovery value as it's referred to. And so that's that gap. And so that's where we need to be working either with lenders who can take that contract as security enough, or other programs that reduce the risk to lenders, which is what I can talk to afterwards on risk reduction programs that the SBA has to try to help fill that gap.
Thank you so much, Veronica. And I want to make sure, because I gave you that opportunity here too, because you gave us that really good education on financial management. Was there any other specifics that you wanted to mention about how SBA's Office of Capital Access helps make capital available to small businesses through the banks and other lending partners? Anything else you wanted to add there?
Sure. So that's where I'd highlight the SBA's capital program. So there are two main ones that I'd highlight for the group. There's the 7A, which is a loan guarantee program predominantly for working capital of sorts, type of use of proceeds. And there's the 504, which is for real estate and fixed assets, both of which would be relevant to this audience. One thing I'd highlight for small business owners is, one, is when you're pursuing these contracts and trying to get the award, it is important to also be exploring how you're going to get the capital to fill the award. So that's kind of my whole explanation beforehand on that gap. The point of that is pursue both paths in parallel, number one. And number two, the SBA loans, these capital programs I just highlighted, the SBA is not the lender. The SBA provides a loan guarantee to other lenders. And so if you're seeking capital that the SBA is a part of, you can go to sba.gov, local assistance. There's a tab on the website labeled local assistance, and get in touch with your local field office to explore which lenders that offer this 7A and 504 loan program could be a good fit for you.
Yeah. And so I think we kind of have, because I was going to go into this other question for you, but let me just kind of speak to it and see if there's any other thoughts that come to mind for you, Veronica, because this is such a powerful conversation, and you've hit on such a critical aspect of connecting the dots so small businesses can be successful. So the share of federal procurement spending going to Black, Hispanic, Asian American, Pacific Islanders, as well as women and rural-owned businesses is substantially underrepresented relative to the total number of U.S. businesses owned. With the bipartisan infrastructure law now in place, more dollars will soon be available. How will SBA prepare our local small businesses to access and compete and secure these new revenue opportunities from GSA's contracting? What thoughts do you have about that?
Yeah, so there are two categories of solutions at the SBA that would be relevant. One is the SBA's 8A program. It is a federal contracting training and technical assistance program that's specifically targeted to support small business owners from socially disadvantaged backgrounds obtain and succeed in fulfilling these contracts. So that's an 8A that's also on the SBA website. So sba.gov, there's a federal contracting tab, and someone can find information about the 8A. Number one. Then number two, I'll come back to my point that getting the contract, managing the contract is one step. Getting the financing to be able to fill the contract. And again, some small business might not need financing, but most often this small business, this opportunity could be life-changing because it's going to take your production to a whole nother level. But oftentimes need capital to be able to get the equipment, the personnel, et cetera, to be able to do that. And so that's the capital piece. Something the SBA is exploring now is solutions to tighten that connection. So I'm highlighting that those two need to be pursued in parallel, and we're exploring how do we bring those together, this contracting support that we have and these capital programs that we have. So stay tuned. That is something that the SBA is more explicitly exploring. For right now, sba.gov, federal contracting 8A program that's there today, right now, online training, and then the funding opportunities that 7A 504 program. You can go to your local field offices to try to find lenders now.
Thank you so much for that, Veronica. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. And Tracy, I'm coming back to you. And I know this is, you were saying at the beginning, I'm glad that your first question wasn't this, but here we go. So Tracy, this one is for you. The Biden administration recently signed the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, as we refer to it. Tackling climate change means investing in federal buildings with low carbon materials and sustainable technologies to create clean energy jobs and build a cleaner, healthier, and more prosperous future for the next generation. So what is PBS doing to show their commitment to sustainability through innovations? And do you expect this to create opportunities for small businesses? So that's the nature of the question around IRA.
So yes, the Biden administration has asked GSA and by extension, the Public Building Service to go further than we have in the past and transition our portfolio to net zero building operations by 2045. An opportunity that is both exciting and a little scary as we look at our portfolio and are trying to find a starting point. The funds from IRA, as we like to call it, provides us, and by extension, small businesses, the means to meet those goals of net zero building operations by 2045. But sustainability is not a new concept to PBS. We're proud to have built some of the first LEED certified buildings in the US. And we've been on the leading edge of this for so long that we've kind of hit a lot of the low hanging fruit that you would consider in a building. You know, our lights are energy efficient. We've deployed a number of building automation systems to help us manage energy and water conservation. In fact, if you could see the background behind me, you would be able to see the blinds that I have zero control over because they rise and lower based on what our energy needs are in the building. And we're constantly asking ourselves how we can understand our portfolio better and in real time, how we can provide services expediently and at a better value, do things better, faster, cheaper, and how we can connect better with our customers and the communities that we serve. We're open to doing things in new ways and using new technologies, even ones that may be relatively new on the market. And I think that's really where you see the intersection between what we're looking at and the challenges we're trying to meet, and how it connects with small businesses and opportunities for small businesses. You know, we've already issued an RFI on low carbon cement. Earlier this summer, we just issued another RFI asking industry to help us, you know, tell us what we don't know. You know, I will be the first to admit I am not the sustainability energy expert. So we need the market and small businesses from across the nation to tell us that which we don't know. And while we're still planning how IRA is utilized, we're doing it with an eye on where we can provide those opportunities for small businesses, particularly socioeconomically disadvantaged small businesses. And, you know, asking companies if there's, you know, if there's an idea, bring it to us. We're willing to test it, pilot it. No, I don't think there's one complete answer. So this is a really exciting time for small businesses who are wondering, how do I do business with the federal government? Where's my niche? Well, we're kind of saying, hey, here's this whole new market and opportunity that you can now tap into. So we're looking forward as we build this out more to those connections and those conversations.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And Exodia, I'm going to ask you to jump into this conversation as well. So if you could please articulate how small businesses play a role in the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act projects, and also what type of technical assistance do you provide, and describe some of the strategies for success for small businesses interested in working with GSA. So if you could kind of, from your perspective and your lens, address some of those questions about both the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah, I appreciate it. One of the things that I always encourage small businesses to do when I'm meeting with them is to also take a look at our forecast of opportunities to If you go to if you just Google it, it'll come up very quickly. GSA's forecast of contracting opportunities tool, it'll come right up. It's a great tool because it helps small businesses plan out what's coming in the future, what's coming in future fiscal years, so that they can develop a strategy around it and prepare for it, do their market research, and know what's coming down. We take great pride in trying to keep that tool up to date. So that's something that I would encourage all small business owners to do. It's critical to do. Look at the forecast of contracting opportunities tool. At OSDBU, we also have small business technical advisors that provide direct assistance to small businesses. We literally work with the contracting officers. We're part of the acquisition workforce. So we're advocating for small businesses, working with the contracting officers, facilitating relationships, doing training for the acquisition workforce, but also training for the small business community. We have a lot of good trainings that go on that teach small businesses how to do business with GSA and the federal government. So I would encourage everyone to participate in those trainings to kind of learn more, specifically with the two laws that you mentioned. Very excited about that. PBS has received, I'm sorry, not PBS, GSA has received, billions of dollars to be able to support the president's plans, and it's going to be a lot of infrastructure investment, historic infrastructure investment. And so there's a role for small businesses to play part with the retrofitting of major buildings that we have, right, in our portfolio. There's going to be across the federal government, not just GSA, but across the federal government, opportunities for small businesses to play rails, expanding access to clean water. Those two laws really encompass so many opportunities for small businesses. The other thing that I would do, and I encourage small businesses to do, is take a look at our GSA strategic plan. That is public information. You want to see where our strategy is going over the next 4 years. We have a strategic plan that we developed through 2026. I encourage small businesses to do that, but also our equity action plan. We did something historic, right? Under this administration, 90 agencies had to come up with these equity action plans. And for SDBs, Tracy talked about it a little bit earlier. For SDBs, this is very important because there's a lot of opportunities for SDBs and socioeconomic entities to play in doing work with GSA and other federal agencies. And the money that we received and that we are receiving from these two laws is going to play a major role in supporting small businesses. So I would say, for the small businesses, they definitely want to stay in contact with the OSDBU. We are your advocates at the agency, but also with the PTAX as well. That's another great resource for small businesses, is working with the PTAX, working with your OSDBU, and then also making sure that you're looking at our forecast of contracting opportunities tool, because it really does give small businesses a competitive advantage in knowing literally what some of the acquisitions are going to be in the future and where the opportunities are. We literally monitor the spend at GSA at OSDBU. So I'm meeting with offices, staff offices, literally every month, PBS every month, FAST every month, looking at the spend, and we're talking about where are those opportunities going to be for small businesses. And so I would encourage small businesses to stay in contact with the OSDBU at GSA. We have small business technical advisors in all 11 regions throughout the country.
Thank you so much, Exodi. And we are getting close to our 2-minute mark here, so I am not going to be able to get to the last couple of questions. But Aaron, I know you're out there. You're hearing all this great information about how small disadvantaged businesses are the heartbeat of the American economy, and that GSA is working on establishing a supplier diversity plan by promoting successful outcomes for vendors. It gives you a chance to continue to think about your strategy for supporting localized economic growth and businesses as the project manager for that Alcan border station project. So you got off the hook pretty easy. I was going to ask you some questions, but you're off the hook. And Kristen, thank you for your information on category management and the resources to go to. So this is actually going to kind of close out our conversation. We'll be having more of these. So thank you all. GSA would like to thank our guest speaker, Mr. Michael Bloom, our incredible panel, Veronica Puhin, Exodi Rowe III, Tracy Marcinowski, Kristen Gergo, and Aaron Evanson, and all of our attendees for taking part in today's important discussion. We hope the insights provided by our panelists are useful to you in better understanding the importance of supplier diversity and carrying out our mission here at GSA and the federal government as a whole. We also wanted to extend a special thank you to Michael McCurdy and Andrew Tully with PBS Office of Acquisition Management, who helped plan and organize this event. And I also want to extend a personal thank you to two women, Julia DeRossi, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the Office of the Office of Project Delivery, and Andrea O'Neill as the Senior Equity Advisor, and for giving me the honor and the opportunity to serve as the moderator for this event. A quick reminder before we go our separate ways. Within the Zoom chat, there's a link to register for an upcoming GSA PBS Public Building Service National Industry Engagement Summit on November 8th, 2022. This event will give you an opportunity to hear more about our upcoming contract opportunities, conducting effective contract searches for contract opportunities on sam.gov, and GSA's role in carrying out major national priorities, and much, much more. Thank you everyone for attending, and this concludes our session.